what I believe is that there's a divine intelligence that knows what is best for us better than we do. But unfortunately, God gave us free will. Everybody has a miracle story or a coincidence or a sign from a departed loved one. But the number of events that I've experienced are just too many. So I listed all the miracles events that I could think of and listed them in a chronological order. And what I discovered was preceding each miracle, and by miracle, I mean getting exactly what you need at just the right time. Preceding that was a coincidence.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shifting Dimensions podcast, where we explore the unseen, the unknown, and the transformative moments that shift our understanding of reality. I'm your host, Jumi Moses, spiritual seeker and metaphysical investigator, exploring the mysteries of existence. On the show today is Sophia Deemas. She is an author, spiritual explorer, and therapist with a rich and unconventional journey. Her memoir, The Divine Language of Coincidence, explores the miracles that began unfolding once she started paying attention, while her follow up book, Consciousness Beyond Death, shares powerful true stories of after death signs and synchronicities. Sophia has led a dynamic life with careers spanning architecture, couture fashion, and mental health therapy. She also created a workshop series for at risk women in the Philadelphia prison system focused on building self-worth and living fearlessly. Her work has drawn interest from scientists studying consciousness and synchronicity and after-death communication. Sophia, welcome to Shifting Dimensions. I'm very thrilled and happy to have you here on the show today.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, so we have so much to cover because you have really lived an unconventional life filled with lots of coincidences and miracles. And I know that you've talked about the fact that you didn't have it as part of your story to be a wife, a mother, and also an author. So can we kind of talk a little bit about how that ended up happening for you and what happened in your life to kind of make you follow that path that you didn't originally create for yourself?
Yes, this is a good way to start this because I feel that, well, basically, okay, so I am a very willful person and I make my decisions, which are, you know, they were definite. I did not want a husband. I did not want children. I wanted to focus on my careers. And about 16, 18 years ago, I was face to face with a medium, which that's another story. That's in the book, how I got with her, and who told me that I was going to write a book. And I told her very emphatically, that is not in the cards. Okay, I said, first of all, I have nothing to write about, but also I'm a people person, and there's no way that I'm going to sequester myself somewhere and write a book. So she just sat there with her hands folded, listening to me. And then she said, word for word, she said, Spirit says when she's ready, there are many spirits here to help her and many hands on earth. And so what happened is I was successfully single until I was 45 years old. And when I got married, and then in 2011, one of my mentors, Father Stephen, I feel that he's the closest thing to Jesus on earth. You know, he's not only a priest, but he also has opened all the covenant houses, which are shelters for homeless youth. And so he introduced me to this lovely young woman from Turkey. He brings her over. She had just turned 19 that week. And we started talking. She brought her over for coffee. And the story I heard of not abandonment and abuse, and then re-abandonment and abuse. Anyway, so the short story is that we adopted her. And so now, like, I'm a mother, and Mother's Day is my new holiday, my new favorite holiday. And then again in 2011, I reconnected with a childhood friend and I told her my latest miracle. And whenever I would tell somebody the latest miracle, they would go, well, these things only happen to you. So, which I found kind of annoying because I'm not special. So I tell her my latest miracle, and she says, oh, these things only happen to you. And something clicked like, wait a second. I mean, everybody has a miracle story or a coincidence or a sign from a departed loved one, but the number of events that I've experienced are just too many. And so I wanted to explore this. So I listed all the miracles events that I could think of and listed them in a chronological order. And what I discovered was preceding each miracle, and by miracle, I mean getting exactly what you need at just the right time. Preceding that was a coincidence. And then what I realized was in every case, I took action on the coincidence. And that is when I decided I wanted to share this information to the world, that I'm not special. And if these things can happen to me, they can happen to you. I realize that people have different backgrounds. And so I have credited my mother for enabling me to go to this point, you know? And I think what happened is she was a very religious woman, but also derived her spirituality from her religion. And she prayed in the morning, prayed at night. She never pushed it on me. But in Greek is my first language. And so you can take any object, like a glass, and then by changing the ending, you can make it diminutive, like the little glass, and it just makes things cute. Okay. So she would say to me, Sophia, if there's anything you want, you just ask little baby Jesus, and just ask him for anything you want. And if you are scared, sometimes at night you get scared, then just ask the little Virgin Mary for protection. So what happened, I realized that from a toddler, communicating with unseen beings was perfectly normal. So I have through my experiences through time, I ask all the time. And all day long I say thank you. And it's just, you know, like please and thank you. And I believe that has connected me to, I guess, this divine intelligence so we communicate through prayer and gratitude. And the divine intelligence communicates with us through very clever ways. Okay, so dreams, meeting a stranger that tells us exactly what we need to hear, or puts coincidences in our path to nudge us through our intuition, through our gut, to take action, and then we get exactly what we want.
What a powerful story that you just shared there. And there was a lot that you said. One of the most interesting things is the fact that miracles can happen to everyone, but sometimes it feels like it's happening more to certain people than others. But you said something that I thought was very important, which is you have or you're presented with what seems like a coincidence, you take action on it, and that's where the miracle kind of falls into your lap. Because a lot of people come across coincidences and they just chuck it up to, well, that was just a coincidence, and they don't really do anything about it. Now, I kind of want to go back in time a little bit, right? Because it seems like you've been sort of connected to that higher intelligence your whole life. And you talk about the influence from your mom, but there was something that happened to you when you were 19 where you were trying to figure out who you were as a person. And then you had sort of like mystical spiritual experience. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So at that time, I was struggling with two issues that I believed to be unsolvable. Like I just didn't know where it was going. And the one issue was I had bought my mother's story about being a virgin until I was married. And marriage was not something that I found very positive. And so I'm like, wait a second, I'm going to die a virgin, Like it just wasn't melding. And then the other was I needed people's approval, and I felt like I was a really good person. And I sometimes I would meet up with somebody that didn't even know me and they didn't like me. And it was like, but how could this be? It was really troubling to me. And so I met this man. I was 19, he was 27, and he was getting his PhD in universal theory or something. And I was deathly attracted to him. And so I had a dream. And in the dream, I mean, I'm not going to tell the whole dream. It was so vivid. I mean, I can relive it, but it started out where I was wearing a wedding dress on stage in a plexiglass, like phone booth or something. And I knew it was plexiglass because I went, oh, it's plexiglass. No groom, okay? And I was just so grateful that all these people came to see me. And then at the end of the dream, people were filing past me, and I was thinking, oh, this is the reception line. But they weren't, not all of, just a few people would even turn to look at me. They weren't even looking at me. And then two people actually smiled. And I'm thinking, okay, is this person going to smile or are they going to just walk by me? And then I look down and I am wearing the wedding dress, but I'm in a coffin. And so I freaked out. I woke up, I freaked out, and I just assumed that this was, telling me that I have had this imminent death, coming up. And what I did in the middle of the night, I went to this man's house. And I knew, because he would be up all night, doing his whatever. And I told him the story. And he said to me, I mean, it was just amazing. It was so transformative. He said, no, this has nothing to do with physical death. He said, what is dying are these thoughts that don't work for you anymore. They're dying to make room for the new thoughts that work for you. And it was just, oh my God. And from that minute, I never cared what anybody thought of me. It was the most freeing thing. And of course, he was my first sexual experience. I mean, it was not that night, but a week later, and it was like unbelievable. Like I entered this womanhood. I mean, it was just transformative. Well, I mean, that's huge. And it was not lost on me. It was like, how did this all happen? And then it was like both of my issues were instantly solved. And then this guy and I just completely went apart. So I thought, wow, you know, like my gut told me to go to see this man. And it was there that he read me these poems he had written about me. And I thought, how can he know what I'm feeling? How can anybody know precisely what I'm feeling? And so that was the beginning. That was the entrance to, wow, this is bigger than me.
Isn't it always so fascinating that we're at a certain crossroads in life and we get exactly what we need at the right moment? So, you meeting that man and having this intense attraction to him, and then having that dream because, you were having these two conflicting perspectives that you are warring with inside of you. You have the dream that's almost like the spiritual awakening in and of itself. And then that guy outside of him being your first like romantic or sexual experience, he also was able to kind of give you words for what you had experienced, right? To really make you understand. So it's interesting how like there was just alignment across all of those different areas for you, which again is a miracle in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. And alignment is a really good word for how it works. Because I feel that the more you align to this divine intelligence, the smoother your life is. If you fight it, then, issues arise. And so what I see is that by taking action, we co-create the miracle with divine intelligence. It's not just given to us. I mean, at times it is, but it's we co-create. And so we are in constant communing with this, with God, with whatever you want to call it.
So you just said something that was very important, which is related to the topic on alignment, right? And you talk about when we are in alignment and we are curious about these nudges and we take action towards them and we're not fighting against them, then life continues to unfold with a little bit more ease. How can someone tell when they're fighting those nudges or not living in alignment with the flow of their life?
Okay, so in my belief system, so you have these positive signs. Okay, these signs that, you know, that remind you that there's something bigger than you. But then there are also obstacles. Okay, there's obstacles that are put in your way. And I'm going to give an example. I'm going to start out with our honeymoon. Okay. So we were going to this place in Mexico, southern Mexico, Huatulco. And well, this place was between Huatulco and Puerto Escondido. And it was this huts that this guy who was a cordon bleu chef ran. Like there was 9 huts. And I had a very good friend that would go every year for and spend her summers there. And it was this beautiful vista of the ocean. So that's where we were going to go for our honeymoon. And also my friend Michelle also had a friend who had a resort in Puerto Escondido. So we were going to go visit her. So I was told that you did not have to have a passport to go to Mexico. So, I didn't have it, it had expired. My husband had his, but I was told, I looked it up. You don't need a passport. You can go with your driver's license. So we go to the airport to, get our plane, and we're going to go to Mexico City and then off to Huatulco and then get a car to go to this place. So the guy at the airport goes, "Can I have your passport?" And I said, "Well, I don't need a passport to go to Mexico." He says, "Well, you're right, but you need a passport to come back to the States." And I'm like, "What?" And I said, "But it's expired." He goes, "Well, do you have a birth certificate?" So I couldn't believe it that we were not going to go. I mean, I was depressed. I got home. We didn't have time to go back and get the flight. And I just sat there. I just was gloomy, sitting on the couch. My husband was trying to pep me up. Nothing worked. And he said, "Look, why don't we just get the next plane to Mexico City and we'll get a room in Mexico City and have dinner?" I went, "Okay." So I found my birth certificate and we go. We got this really cool hotel, this old hotel, and we had this wonderful dinner. And the next day we go to get the plane to Huatulco. And the guy says, "Oh, I'm sorry. This plane that just left was the last plane to Huatulco because there's a hurricane. I said, I don't care. I said, this is my honeymoon. I said, I don't care. I need to go there. And he says, well, there's a plane that's leaving in 20 minutes for Puerto Escondido. And so we run over to the thing, get on the plane, and we land in Puerto Escondido, and all the palm trees were like facing one way. It was incredible. I mean, it was like a hurricane. And so we go to my friend's friend who was from California, who had this beautiful resort. And we were having lunch out in this covered area with it was thatched roof, kind of plaza, open air. And so I'm eating my soup, and I knew we were in trouble when one of the thatched roof, like the hay came into my soup. Like I'm like, oh gee. And so I thought, oh, because I saw the help was, bustling. So I said, oh, can we order something? Because I thought we need dinner. And the waitress said, well, I'm sorry, the kitchen has closed. The chef is just making lunch for us. And I said, what's for lunch? And she goes, potato omelet. I said, we'll take two. We'll take two potato omelets. So I got some, plates and whatever, flatware and napkins. And it was just, I mean, fighting this wind and rain. And so we go into the room. We had brought wine from the wedding. So we had our wine, and the woman who had the resort brought, candles. And so that night, of course, I mean, I have pictures of Frank, my husband, sweeping water out, because it was just coming in. And we had this wonderful little romantic dinner. And we woke up in the morning, there's no water. And it turns out that I believe like 450 people died as a result of that. But we were in a very enclosed sort of cove, and it was just a mess. And we were able to go to the airport and go to Oaxaca for 4 days, had a great time in Oaxaca, came back. The road was clear. So we decided to go and to the place that we were supposed to be. So we get there and we find five people there. It was the owner, the couple, a Canadian couple that sort of cleaned, and then another couple, and they were sleeping in one of the huts. 7 out of the 9 huts had gone down the mudslide. One was damaged completely, and now these five people are sleeping in one hut where we would have. So if this I mean, I fought it because it was my will. I'm going, I don't care, hell or high water. And we most likely were saved from death. And it was not, I didn't say, oh, God, whatever's best, because that's what I say now, whatever's best. I can say, well, this is what I'd like, but whatever's best, because there you go.
Okay, so just to make sure the listeners fully grasp what you're trying to say is that sometimes when we're on a specific path and we have a specific desire and there are obstacles and roadblocks, we should pay attention to those roadblocks and obstacles and not necessarily try to override them with our will. Granted, you and your husband, thank God you guys were saved, and it's unfortunate that so many lives were lost in that hurricane. But had you, I guess, accepted those obstacles, you probably wouldn't have had to potentially put yourself in that scenario or that situation.
Exactly, because okay, so there's two main obstacles here. One was getting the wrong information about the passport. Okay,
Mhm.
going there without a passport. Okay, that and losing the flight. That was one. And the other one was missing the plane, to
Mhm.
go there. And so it was like, and it was just so, again, bigger than me. Look what happened. I mean, And how many times have I said to God, why are you doing this to me? Only either same day or 2 years down the road, thanked God for that obstacle. I mean, how many Mr. Wonderfuls I dated in my life that didn't turn out, only to find, this one died, this one went to jail, this one went crazy, and then finding the right one for me, which is another story.
This conversation is so synchronistic, and I have this experience quite often on the show where I'm wrestling with something and I have the opportunity to speak with an amazing guest like yourself who says something that answers the question to what I've been wrestling and what I've been struggling with this past week. The theme was, I've been asking, praying, trying to manifest certain things in my life. And certain things will be presented that seem so perfect, but then there's this like obstacle that kind of takes away from the fact that this is, what I should where I should settle or how I should move forward. And I was getting so frustrated, right? Because I'm like, I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, this seems like exactly what I was asking for, but then there's this huge obstacle here that I cannot ignore. So, you hearing what you just said, listening to your story, has brought me some peace and understanding.
Okay, so I have identified three phases on one spiritual journey. Okay, so the first phase is where I think most people are, and it's from the perspective of wishful thinking. Okay, so you're wishing for something. Here comes the coincidence. Here's the dream. Here's the stranger. And you go, oh, what a coincidence. And keep on wishing. And another coincidence. And you don't do anything about it. Oh, wow, that was a real coincidence. And that's what you were saying earlier about, like, when you think of a word and then somebody says it on TV. Well, that's just a coincidence. There's nothing, no meaning to it. But then there's the meaningful one, which I'll talk about, about the getting the venue for the wedding. So, okay, so that's wishful thinking. Then the next phase is from the perspective of hope. So now you get it. Okay, here's the coincidence. It's bigger than me. I'm taking action and hopefully I will get what I want. And then the the phase on top, which, because I'm human, I go in and out, is from the perspective of faith. Once you accept that this divine intelligence guides you and will put obstacles to help you out, you don't worry about anything. I mean, it's why worry? I mean, okay, so it didn't work out. It wasn't meant to be. Or, wow, look what I got. So, so this phone call, actually, I was calling a very good friend. And this man answers that when I said, "Is Ann there?" He says, "Sophia, it's Jerry. You called me. Listen, I'm late for a meeting. Can I call you back?" And I'm like, because he had a Greek accent, and this guy I just knew socially. And he recognized my voice. I mean, on top of everything, I said, "Jerry, promise me. Okay, promise me that you are going to call me. Okay, but before you go, what is your telephone number?" So I had misdialed the last digit, and I get somebody else that I knew in Philadelphia. I mean, that in itself. So he called me, and at the time, he owned the Barclay Hotel here in Philadelphia, which is this grand old world hotel. And I told him I was getting married, and we were looking because we only had 3 months from when we decided to get married to the actual wedding date. And he gave us the ballroom of this hotel for free. He kicked in the presidential suite for 2 nights, but he asked if he and his girlfriend could be invited to the wedding, which of course you can. So that is a meaningful coincidence. You dial a number, you get somebody you know who happens to have a hotel and gives you the ballroom for your wedding. That is the miracle. But you see, I could have said, "Oh, no, you don't have to. This is a wrong number. I have nothing to talk to you about." But isn't it wild, you know? And then the other thing that happened was when this woman called to tell me that she had found my driver's license. And she said, "Well, how can I give it to you?" And I said, "Oh, she lived just 2 blocks away." I said, "Well, just put it through my mail slot." Okay, end of story. No. So it was just before the wedding. She called and said, "I know you're going to think this is weird, but I just found your ATM card." The same woman. And I would go to this ATM machine that would spit out the card right away. Well, this one kept it. And then at the end of the transaction, it says, "Would you like another transaction?" Well, I thought I had the card. So the next person could just wipe out my bank account. It was her. And so she says, "Would you like me to put it through your mail slot?" I said, "No, we've got to meet." Okay, so she comes to my studio and I find out that she's a concert violinist, and she ended up getting her friend who played the classical guitar, and she, for our wedding, she didn't charge any money, but I had to give him some. And they played my favorite piece of music, Concierto de Aranjuez, as I walked down the aisle. So, so again, you know, can I put it through the mail slot? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. But whoa, isn't this a coincidence? No, it's bigger than me. We've got to meet. And look what I got out of it. So the obstacle story is in the same vein for our good. And so this divine intelligence just wants us, it wants us to be happy and find our true purpose. And by paying attention and aligning and experiencing, I truly believe that, and I thank God for every single miracle. I have found my true purpose and I am sublimely happy. How does that work?
Fantastic story and example that you just gave. So, just to make sure I fully understand what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that sometimes you have obstacles, right? So, with the stories with, getting a wedding venue and then also having this amazing band come play at your wedding, at some point it was an obstacle for you getting a venue for your wedding, right? And because of that faith, as you outlined in the 3 stages of like, 3 phases of someone's, I guess, spiritual journey, right? Which is the wishful thinking, then you have hope, then you have faith, right? And in that moment, you're planning your wedding, you're trying to lock down a venue and everything. It's a little bit hard. You come across 2 people that give you a fantastic venue and a band basically for free. So it's like you have an obstacle, but you trust that everything is still going to work out. And it works out even better than you could have imagined because had you been able to get a venue earlier, you would have had to pay for it, right? So now you had a venue for free for your wedding, which is unheard of. That's almost
Yes.
everyone's dream. So I really like that you broke that down because I don't want people to think that all because there's an obstacle in your way, that doesn't mean that it's not necessarily the right path for you. Because someone could read that as, oh, well, you can't find a venue for your wedding. Maybe you shouldn't be getting married, right? Or, all of these different things. Because sometimes you think about that, like it feels like an aligned path that I'm on, but I don't understand why this obstacle is here. You know what I mean? And having the faith to understand that things are still going to work out. So I guess what I'm trying to ask you, I guess a follow-up question is, what is the difference between, okay, here's an obstacle here, I'm being redirected, versus there's an obstacle, I'm still on the right path and things will actually work out for me better?
Yes. Well, first of all, I could have rented the church hall. I have a friend who's a events planner and she could make a warehouse look beautiful. So, it wasn't like it was the end of the world, but I was going along. And then I actually did get a call from this one venue that they had a cancellation, but it was thousands of dollars. And I thought, well, why not? It's so beautiful. And then this thing happens. And also I have found that I don't view one miracle to be bigger or lesser than the other miracle. Okay. I mean, getting what you need at just the right time is a miracle. And yet, and I'm not going to tell the story, but I'm going to just do a quick little outline. So, very early on in my relationship with my husband, I found out that he had an anger issue that stemmed from, childhood issues. And he would just go into a rage. Like he would perceive something innocent that I would do, like pick up a glass or something. And it was like I was demeaning him. And this was all going back to childhood. And he would just rage. And I stayed because I saw how important this relationship was for him. And he tried going to a therapist. And then he found this men's group. It was called Menergy, and it was a bunch of ragers, like from all walks of life. And he became the poster boy, but continued to rage. And finally, I left. Well, within, so I went in and I actually moved in with a friend of mine who was actually going through a divorce. And we got to a point where I never wanted to see this guy again. I've had it with this jerk. I'm done. And within 2 months, so if people want to know what happened, they have to if this is in my first book, three incredible coincidences happened. I mean, the first one had to do with reading something in A Course in Miracles, which I don't know. Are you familiar with it? Yes. And the second one, because, I vowed would never see this guy again, but the first one led me, because of what I read, to say, okay, you can come over, but still I was angry. Well, what happened is, and I was angry. He came over. I was just angry at the whole thing. And I said to him, I said, the only reason you are sitting in front of me is because of a miracle. And he said, well, I have a miracle for you too. And I'm like, huh? And then ex so, so now I'm like, okay, I'm dying because this is not his lingo. And he tells me that he was fixing the pump in our we have this fountain in the garden. And so it's a basin, and then there's a tall, heavy concrete fountain column. So the water comes, hugs the column, and goes into the basin. And he said he was fixing the pump and the column fell on his hand. And as he's telling me this, I'm looking at his hand that should be hamburger. If this is true, his hand should be gone. And he's taking off his wedding ring and he shows me the squashed wedding band that had taken the weight of this column. His wedding, I mean, how symbolic. So, so that completely disarmed me. Now remember, my will never see this guy again. He's done. And I needed something that dramatic to disarm me and to agree to we start seeing each other. And then the third thing that happened had to do with another book that I'm not going to tell the story, but we ended up having these energy clearings in Hawaii. That was in 2009. And he has had one anger episode since. I'm married to my dream guy. So, how does that work?
I got chills all over my body when you told the story about how the ring was able to withstand the weight of that object falling on it. And to your point, it's very symbolic, right? Because kind of almost like a metaphor for being able to overcome what you guys were facing at that moment. And like almost kind of the ring was that foundation. You know what I mean? The marriage, the commitment was that foundation to be able to overcome it. And then the energy clearing that you guys had in Hawaii also synchronistically, and now he's a transformed person. So, what an amazing story. And again, it goes back to what you started off talking about, which is there's a coincidence and then taking an action on that coincidence, being open to it, being in flow with that nudge or that redirection, which
And,
is, yeah,
and this is a perfect example of this intelligence that's bigger than me is saying, no, you two should be together. And I'm orchestrating this. And also, I believe also that our departed loved ones, they kind of act as intercessors. Like I just know that it was my mother that wanted me to have a daughter. She wanted me to have children. She wanted me to get married. I mean, it was, oh my God, that was her thing. And look what happened. Like, I have this beautiful daughter that is married to this Greek architect living in Greece. She has three masters, just, she's an epidemiologist. And it's just this love that I have, because again, I didn't seek any of this out. I did not. And yet, look what has happened to for me to have this purposeful life. And I think what happened too is going from working in architecture, and then my last stint there was designing biotechnology laboratories, which was so far from beauty. So that's when I went into fashion design. And then it was in fact when I was dealing with clients. And so I would have like this beautiful woman with a beautiful body with oodles of money. And these women were miserable. That's when I went back and got my master's in counseling psychology. And I thought, no, there's something that's more important, and that's self-esteem. And so what happened is, I think also is because my purpose has now it evolved into helping others because it isn't fair. It just isn't fair that I had these loving parents that raised me with love. And here I have clients. My last job, my employer was the Salvation Army. And so I was the in-house counselor for a residence that housed ex-trafficked women. That the trauma, I mean, I had no idea that a number of these women were trafficked by their mothers because for drugs. I mean, how fair is that? So it was like, I had some real success stories, and that became my purpose, So, and people's purpose is different, different takes.
yeah.
But this is what I needed to do.
I'm so happy that you kind of brought up your journey and how your purpose evolved, right? Because I wanted to ask you, since we've been talking about miracles, coincidences, taking action, kind of being in flow with your life and co-creating with this higher intelligence, a lot of times people talk about manifestation. So, and sometimes I think about manifestation as like, okay, I'm going to map out my life to look exactly like this, and I'm going to manifest all these things, and I'm not going to veer off that path. And I just want to know your thoughts on that and if you incorporate manifestation into your books and the things that you talk about, or how do you view it?
Okay, so I am all for manifestation. However, the book, The Secret, I that is not my philosophy. You don't just sit there and go, okay, I'm going to think it. Okay, here's an example of people thinking this. Okay, so when I wrote my first book, I was given 100 advanced reader copies. And so when I did my book proposal, you do part of it is a marketing plan, and it asks you who you think your target market is and who is not your target market. So I said the market that is not my target markets are the atheists and the evangelicals, you know, that need to have it by the Bible, by the book. So I don't know any evangelicals, but I know a lot of atheists. So I gave it to 10 atheists. 10% of my books went to atheists. And then they had to answer a little questionnaire. And all 10 of them loved the book. All 10 said that they would give it to another atheist. But all 10, in so many words, said, no, these are not miracles. It is your all powerful mind that manifested this miracle. And then you cleverly grasp the opportunity, and it is your achievement, and you have no business crediting God. It's all your brain. Well, that to me is weirder. It's weirder than having this thing. So then what is confirming all this is that these scientists are now interested in both books. So now what's really trending out there that you can find tons of information is synchronicity. That is a trending thing. Lots of scientists studying it. And so there's this very interesting group of esteemed scientists. It's called the Scientific and Medical Network. People should look it up because they have some incredible programs. So they invited me to help plan and participate in the Synchronicity Summit. And as the only non-scientist, non-academic. And it was such an amazing experience. And then it went so well that they published a book of these scientists' essays. And the book is titled The Playful Universe. And I'm chapter 17. I mean, like, how did that happen? Interestingly, there was no interest in the second book at first. And have you read this book or heard of it, Proof of Heaven by Dr. Eben Alexander?
Yes, I've heard of that. Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Alexander read my book and loved it. And when he found out that I was writing the second book, and that's Consciousness Beyond Death, he asked if I would send him my manuscript so that he can endorse the book. And I thought, oh, great. So then he contacts me and he says, I'm sorry, I can't endorse this book because there's not substantial discussion on consciousness. That was such BS. I mean, it the whole foreword that was written by Dr. Deborah Green, who's a kinesiologist, who did the energy clearings in Hawaii. That's all it was about. It was consciousness. But what he was telling me, it was a code for, look, I can have a near-death experience as a scientist, as a neurosurgeon, and I can write about it because it's an NDE. It's a near-death experience. And NDEs have been studied for decades. But I can't touch your topic with a 10-foot pole. So again, lucky for me, okay, just before publication of the second book, and this book is 7 out of the 10 chapters are my experiences communicating with departed loved ones, or just even stories that had to do that related to death. Three are stories of close friends that are mind blowing. So, just before publication, a new scientific field of study crops up. ADC, after death communication. So now there's interest, but the field is nascent. It's just at its, like, like an infant, but when the interest happens, there's my book. So, and it's just exciting to understand that when we die, we just shed our bodies and we're just as conscious as you and I are right now, just as conscious. And I know for a fact that when I go into this other realm, I will be able to communicate with loved ones I left behind. So there's no fear of death. There's just, or getting old. I mean, it's a badge of honor. And then I have that to look forward to.
Very interesting what you just said about, the first book when you're talking about synchronicities and coincidences, people are scientists were more interested in that because that's a, pretty popular topic that people have been studying now for a while. But after death communication, while people do study near death experiences, they weren't fully ready to grasp the after death communication part of it, right? Because maybe that's a little too woo for them.
Well, okay, but the executive director of the Scientific and Medical Network, he admonishes scientists that are not open to it because his view is that in the face of insurmountable anecdotal evidence, I mean, it's okay, so you can't, so, okay, this person almost died, went to heaven, and comes back and talks about it. But this is people that are gone. So how can these things happen? Can I give you one example? Well, I'm going to give you two examples that happened after the book was published. So these two are not in the book. So so I went to my ophthalmologist and told her about my second book. And she says, "Well, I have a story for you." I go, "Okay." And she tells me that she and her husband had to go to this gala. And she didn't want to go because she was dead tired, but they had to go. And then she said she had to take the babysitter home because the husband's rule is never be alone with a female babysitter. She says, "I'm driving home, and all of a sudden I heard my grandmother scream, 'Wake up!' And she goes, 'I came to, and I'm heading right into a brick wall.'" Okay, this is unsolicited. She was unconscious. She was not conscious. She was asleep at the wheel. And this unsolicited help came from her grandmother to save her life. Okay, so that is one, completely unsolicited. The second one was solicited, and it happened to me. So it's been months that I lost one of my oldest and dearest friends, a friendship of 40 years, just this global person, Indian, of Indian descent, who grew up in South Africa. Her brothers are in Australia, so she would go there. And her undergraduate was University of Edinburgh, PhD from Penn over here. And she died of a heart attack. 2 days before that, I had the incredible good fortune of having this wonderful FaceTime visit with her, where she told me that she loved me and I was her sister. So it's just been, just unbelievable, the shock. I mean, it was just unbelievable that she just went like that. So it was a few months ago, and I'm walking down the street thinking of her. And then I found myself kind of talking to her. And I said, Pushpa, I said, maybe this is too soon, but when you're ready, I want a sign from you. And I just put it away. The next morning, I received a Facebook friend request from her.
How is that possible?
Well, I've had that happen before where somebody who's already my friend wants to be my friend, but there's no photograph of them. It's like somebody's trying to hack in my account or something. But
Okay.
there was her picture. And but my thing is the timing. It was like not only that, I have over 600 friends. Of all my friends, that's the one that
Oh,
asks for a friend request. So so just I'm going to encourage people to just keep asking. Ask for whatever you want. I mean, your departed loved ones, just because you ask doesn't mean that they're going to show up. But they might.
yeah. Oh man, you bringing up the fact about the importance of asking for what you want ties back into what we were talking about in terms of like being in flow and manifesting exactly what you want to manifest. But you also said something earlier at the beginning of our conversation, which is we are co-creating with this higher intelligence, and sometimes they know what's better for us. And we have to be okay to surrender what might be a better outcome for us. And like you said, our loved ones act as intercessors sometimes for us, and we're able to communicate with them. And I think the stories that you just shared obviously show that we're still connected to them, whether they're sending us a sign to say hello or trying to redirect us and stop us from hitting a brick wall as we're
Yes.
driving. You know what I mean?
Yes. Even if they're not showing up, they're there.
And kind of going back to what you said about the science community not originally not wanting to pay attention to after death communication. And now it's becoming more widespread and people are more open to it. And the fact that we have all of this experiences that people are constantly talking about being able to communicate with their loved ones. And I would even, postulate as well that a lot of scientists are able to communicate. They've probably had communication with loved ones, but again, people just chuck it up to either some sort of hallucination or they're making it up, right? Because it doesn't fit within the scientific box that has been created. But what I think we're starting to understand as a society is the fact that we are cosmically blind. And the more I have these conversations, the more I feel like the spirit world is actually more real than
Hmm.
this physical
Yes.
3D world that we're actually living in. So what's fascinating, and also with the rise now of quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and trying to understand that and realizing that I believe that quantum mechanics and quantum physics is the science that explains the spiritual dimension, to be quite honest.
Jumi, I mean, I have to tell you the fact that you brought this up. When I started writing my first book, something told me that I needed to study quantum mechanics. Now, my faith is unshakable, but I had this curiosity. How could these things happen in our physical world? And it helped studying quantum mechanics, like the theory of entanglement, that two people or two atoms that coincide have contact and then could be at the opposite ends of the universe and could influence each other faster than the speed of light or the sound. I mean, it really gives some amazing theories. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm glad that I did too. And it's interesting that you had that nudge to look into that
Yes.
while you were writing your book, how fascinating that is. So, this has been a really good conversation, and I love having conversations like this because, again, I think we need to be reminded that even though we wake up every single day and we kind of put one foot in front of the other, and for a lot of people, life is mundane and we're kind of in the rat race, there are miracles all around us, right? We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think this validates that. And I want people, as they're listening, feel free to comment any sort of miracles or synchronicities or coincidences that you've experienced, throughout your life or recently would love to hear that. Sophia, I guess what's next for you? Are you going to have a follow-up to the books that you've already written?
No, I'm
Uh,
done. I'm done. I'm done. I've told all my stories, but another, just to follow up on that quantum mechanics, this urging. So I got this book. It was by
Mhm.
Stephen Hawking. And I am telling you, I would not sit and read this book. I just would not read this book. I ended up participating in this art. It was a interactive art sort of happening where I was invited by this museum and they wanted somebody to sit on this couch, on this black couch. And it was in the back, it said, I love melancholy. And I called them. I called them and I said, can I read? They wanted 4 hour shifts. You can have a 4 hour shift. And I said, could the person that's sitting on the couch read? And they said, yeah, that's the artist wants the person to sit on the couch. And I said, sign me up for 10 sessions. And I forced, it forced me to sit during that time and read the book. And I finished it right at the 10th session. And it was just like another confirmation at how clever this divine intelligence can be. And I want that to be the takeaway that, and if people are saying, well, these things don't happen to me. Well, you would be surprised if you started thinking, like, wait a minute, how did I meet my husband? Or how did I get that job? Or wait a second, you know, more often than not, you can identify some coincidences that brought you to that.
But I will say too, Sophia, that you're pretty clever because there are some coincidences that are a little bit more obvious for people to take, right? Like, let's say, for example, you're looking for a job and someone that you worked with 2 years ago posts on LinkedIn that they're hiring for the exact job that you're looking for. Well, I mean, that's easy to take action and reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm, in the job market versus some of the stories that you've told. I don't think I would have thought if I accidentally called someone, I don't think I would have been adamant and wanting them to call me back or making sure that we connect. Or if somebody found my wallet, twice, I don't think I would have thought to be like, actually, let's meet. I probably would have just been like, yeah, leave it in the mailbox again. Right. So I think that what you're talking about and what I'm realizing in this conversation, it's yes, take action, but also really pay attention to your life. Pay attention to things that seem out of the ordinary. And even when it seems like the action you're supposed to take, it might not be crystal clear, but like, follow that curiosity, kind of really
Yes.
pay attention. So thank you for all of the stories that you shared. I can't wait to go back and listen to this episode. And I'm also happy that we talked about the fact that the scientific community now and is embracing a lot more of these subject matters. And I'm very excited to see where the study of quantum mechanics, where it goes and the new things that are discovered. So thank you so much. I have to ask you, have you shifted in perspective on anything? And I ask this question to my guests because I feel like we're constantly shifting. So it could be lighthearted. Maybe you started eating a dish that you swore you would never eat, or maybe, I don't know, maybe another miracle you stumbled upon.
Well, I would say that this last work that I did with the trafficked women, I felt it was a gift, to be able to just be there for somebody. I mean, one woman went from, she couldn't even look at me. She couldn't even look at, this is what she said to me. She said, I really appreciate the fact that you don't call yourself a therapist and that you call yourself a counselor. And I said, oh, really? I said, why is that? And she said, well, if you break up the, therapist, it spells the rapist. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I haven't used that word, I mean, since then I call myself a counselor, but she went from not even, like being constrained, in a psychiatric hospital to going to get her master's degree. So the fact that I could just have that opportunity to be there, just to be there for them, you know. I mean, I would say that's my latest, and it has given me profound gratitude. I mean, I've always been great. I say literally all day long, thank you, thank you, thank you. But thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sophia. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you or purchase your books?
Well, my website is my name, Sophia Demas, Demas.com. And for people who are kind of into the mystical, you can go on to this page. It's my influencers. Okay, there's 8 people that I have had personal communication with that I consider to be my mentors. And if you only read one blurb, it's Abbess Emiliani, and
Mm.
she's a nun. You can't miss her. And her story, she's a magnificent human. She runs a monastery in Maryland. And her story is a firsthand account of bilocation, of being 2 places at once.
Mm.
It's an incredible story. So, and then you can, my books are, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can get them through my website.
Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna leave those links in the show notes. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Sophia. Really have so much gratitude for the work that you do and sharing your time with me today.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure was mine. Thank you so much, Jumi.